Okay, hi everybody. Like I said in the last game, Lowdive and I played two games a few weeks ago, and I said I would cast the second one as well, and I think this is maybe the more interesting of the two games, certainly the longer one. So to start us off, Lowdive is in the bottom left, once again playing US in dark green. I am in the top right playing Great Britain in yellow. We're playing on a map called Desert Needle Small, which I really enjoyed. It was our first game on this map. It ended up working out really well for Spring 1944. And yeah, so while we're kind of getting set up in the initial flag capture phase, I'll talk a little bit about faction strategy in the infantry stage. So, I'm playing Great Britain. Great Britain is distinctive in that its kind of default infantry squad, the one that comes from the HQ, first of all, only has a handful of rifles, and second of all, includes a Bren gun, a light machine gun. This is significant because it means that in a kind of head-on infantry-to-infantry engagement, Great Britain has less standard kind of damage-dealing output at range, but it has the critical ability to suppress enemy infantry right from the get-go. This is really interesting because for most other sides, the ability to suppress others, or well, for some other sides, the ability to suppress enemy infantry doesn't arrive until you get a barracks and your own machine guns or assault rifles or that sort of thing. So, what the kind of implication of that in infantry combat is when you're playing as Great Britain, it is imperative that you keep your Bren guns alive. If you can manage the infantry stage and keep your Bren guns alive, you'll kind of enter. You can kind of develop this critical mass of Bren guns that makes it very, very difficult for the other player to deal with your infantry using their own infantry forces. Conversely, if you lose your Bren guns, either from snipers or from mortars or from enemy machine guns or just plain old flanking, your life as a British player gets very difficult because otherwise you don't have the infantry numbers to deal with the other player, typically. Great Britain, as a rule, has fewer, more expensive, higher hit point infantry. The US is kind of a benchmark, they're kind of standard infantry, while the USSR has many more infantry, they're a little bit less sturdy, and German infantry are kind of somewhere in between. They're a little bit better than the US, but not a lot. So we can see that Lowdive kind of pushed out into the middle here, and I did the same, so we kind of have force-on-force infantry engagement right now. I'm doing my best to keep these Bren guns alive because they're really important, like I just said. I noticed he captured these flags right here, so I decided to come in and kind of flank him. I saw he ran away down here, and decided I'd probably be able to take on that force, especially with my Bren guns, and so I came and did. While he did that, obviously he swooped in behind me to recapture those flags. At the moment, Lowdive's going for a very standard build order, so he did barracks first, and now he's doing vehicle yard. I'm doing something a little bit more non-traditional in that I went barracks and then into towed gun yard. The kind of critical thing to remember about build orders in Spring 1944 is that sooner or later somebody ends up with tanks. And so pretty much every build order you decide on, every build order that's available to you, you have to consider how it's going to deal with tanks when they pretty much inevitably show up. It's a very rare game that goes past, say, 15 or 20 minutes, 20, 25 minutes that doesn't have armor in it. So, in my case, the options I have with the towed gun yard are first just the plain old deployable anti-tank gun, which is very good for Great Britain. It's a 17-pounder. Also, I can upgrade the tank yard to get mobile tank destroyers. So that's kind of my thinking here. Personally, I really like playing with infantry. I tend to have more of an advantage playing infantry v infantry than when I'm in armor combat. So I tend to kind of favor that stage of the game, and using towed guns lets me kind of emphasize the infantry side of things. You can see an interesting thing here that Lowdive built a supply truck from the barracks and deployed it right in the middle here to create a supply zone. So with this force of infantry, if I were to attack it, I would be running into 30% fire rate bonus that he gets from being inside that zone with his infantry. For heavier units like tanks and vehicles, they don't get a fire rate bonus, but that gives them extra ammo. And this fire rate bonus is actually large enough that he can attack me from within it, which is really problematic because even though I have Great British units are a little stronger, once the American units get into range, their damage output is very high. I'm even more in trouble because he has these two half-tracks here with their 50 cal machine guns, and I have basically nothing in this little area that can deal with vehicles. So you can see I saw that, and I'm bringing up my anti-tank gun to try to get there as quickly as I can. This guy is also, that anti-tank gun is also coming around to try to get there. However, everything that he has in that zone has there, between the supplied infantry and the half-tracks, which are also supply units, he just kind of wiped out these infantry very quickly. And that put me in a kind of a bad spot. I was lucky in that I was able to get my anti-tank guns up kind of just in time, but really this is a bad situation. I'm trying to bait these vehicles forwards a little bit, so that they come into the range of the anti-tank guns and get sniped. He comes into range, notices them, and runs right away, which is good thinking on his part. Basically, because he had infantry support close enough, you can see he was concerned about that. He had infantry support just close enough to the vehicles that he saw those guns before they were able to fire on him. I, conversely, did not have enough infantry there, so they couldn't see him. However, I kind of rallied enough infantry here, especially the Bren guns. You can see that it's pinning these guys. The Bren guns are pinning these infantry, giving me the kind of numerical advantage without actually killing them. That I was able to kind of clear out that zone. At this point, I'm feeling pretty good. So if we look at comparative resources, I've got plus 51 and about 800 in the bank. He's got plus 50 and almost nothing. However, he's starting to produce Greyhounds, which are really solid light vehicles. At this point, I have a couple of anti-tank guns up, but I haven't upgraded to light tank destroyers, so all of my anti-vehicle capability is dependent on these statically deployed guns. But at least I have most of the map, so I'm feeling pretty good right now. Lowdive is doing kind of a cool mechanized infantry attack here, where he's loading up a whole bunch of infantry into half-tracks. Another interesting thing he's doing is kind of securing his base to vehicle raids with anti-tank traps, and setting up, he labeled it for us nicely, a trap for enemy vehicles entering his base with those two anti-tank guns there. But at this point I'm starting to build more and more anti-tank guns, so I've got pretty good coverage of the important parts of the map with my anti-tank guns. More importantly, they're supported by infantry and observers, which give me enough visibility to kind of see the tanks, see the vehicles before they can just drive right by the anti-tank guns. So I also tried to put out a couple of trucks for the same reason that Lowdive had this truck, in order to get these supply zones up, so that first of all my guns have ammo, my anti-tank guns have ammo, and second of all so my infantry are supplied and get that fire rate bonus I mentioned. At this point I realized I was kind of starting to excess on resources, so I'm upgrading my towed gun yard to a tank destroyer yard. Lowdive sent out a scout plane to kind of get a sense of where I was. And this is a pattern we're going to see several times in this game, where Lowdive kind of masses a chunk of forces, scouts out where my guys are, and then very carefully runs around them. You can see his move orders here kind of skirting my forces. I didn't even see them, actually, at that point. So this is kind of interesting. I did finally get my scout plane over there and realized, oh hey, where'd those vehicles go? Uh-oh. There they are. And right when I saw them, I knew that they were headed on a flank up the corner here. That has to be where they're going. So I started deploying my anti-tank gun there, and also recalling several of these anti-tank guns, so as to get a little more support back in the corner here, because right now with just one anti-tank gun he could easily suppress that and then march right into my base, kill my storage, and that would pretty much be game over at this point. However, this is a lot of resources, this chunk of vehicles, so if I'm able to kill them, I'll be in pretty good shape. So you can see I'm withdrawing a lot of force to get back there and deal with this. And I mean, I think it was excessive, and I noticed that and kind of sent these guys back. But the biggest and most important thing here is to have sufficient anti-tank guns to deal with, you know, the 5 or so half-tracks and collection of infantry here. This is a really cool mechanized infantry attack because he's able to capture these flags from me. An interesting mechanic in terms of resource control in Spring 1944 is that the longer you hold a flag, the more it produces for you. And that's significant because when it gets captured, that resource gain gets reset. So if you have a flag right near your base that you've owned for 10 minutes, it's probably producing substantially more than it used to. If it gets captured in a raid, it goes back to the kind of starting production value. So Lowdive, by capturing these flags here, has actually deprived me of resources for a pretty solid amount of time. Because they're so close to my base, I captured them so early. Okay, so we can see this attack is going on here. I've got a couple of anti-tank guns that are really taking care of business. Thankfully, I was able to kill his Greyhound, so no more of his vehicles are able to actually attack my buildings. And, you know, between the infantry here, I'm in pretty good shape. He did manage to run his half-tracks up, but thankfully my AA guns here were able to deal with it. And so that was pretty much the end of that attack. Also, because I was upgrading to a tank destroyer yard, I finally have my own kind of mobile units, which are Daimlers, or excuse me, AECs. And so an AEC is a light tank destroyer. It has a pretty solid anti-tank weapon and surprisingly good armor for the size of unit that it is. But it isn't a tank, it's a vehicle. So, okay, so anyways, I dealt with that attack, that was good. However, simultaneously, Lowdive has actually built up quite a force, including these Scots. So Scots are armored like light tanks, but they have a 75mm explosive cannon, so they're extremely powerful in the infantry stage. I have an anti-tank gun here that's kind of holding him at bay, but his infantry superiority here is probably going to push me out. Thankfully, my Brens have been able to suppress a big chunk of units there. So I had a little bit of time to get more anti-tank guns in place, bring up some more infantry, and that's that. On the whole, I was, at this point in the game, I was feeling pretty good. You know, he has a couple of Scots, but I can deal with that because I'm building these AECs, which are plenty strong to deal with Scots. I've got lots of anti-tank guns. I'm pretty sure I have an advantage in terms of infantry numbers, which if you're Great Britain and you have an advantage in infantry numbers, you're in a pretty good spot. He did manage to overrun this spot, so you can see I'm kind of undeploying things and running them away, and some of them just getting taken out. But I have these Daimlers coming in, or excuse me, AECs coming in to deal with some of those Scots and kind of scare them away. The one thing I neglected to do is spend my resources. So you can see that up here I've got like a 3k excess right now. Compared to Lowdive, excuse me, I have substantially more resources, but only because he's spending them. So he is actually upgraded to tanks. He has a full tank yard and he's already building his first Shermans. Or excuse me, he started with a Wolverine. Okay, but he's got tanks. And at this point in the game, I didn't know that. That's important because I don't yet have the capability to really deal with tanks effectively. I've got light tank destroyers and some static anti-tank guns, but nothing that would keep a force of medium tanks from kind of rampaging around the map. But I do have a lot more infantry than he does. Oh, you can see right there. I was not paying attention. I drove the vehicle right into his infantry and it got taken out by grenades. But he kind of made a silly frontal assault here on my Bren guns, and so he's getting a lot of units, a lot of really highly experienced units pinned, and they're just going to get taken out for pretty much nothing. And because I had such an advantage in numbers, I was able to bring some AECs up behind to take out these Scots and Wolverine. So there was that. And yeah, but the main problem is still I'm not spending my money. I decided to add a vehicle yard. I was thinking probably for kangaroos, but honestly I was in such a good spot I was like, oh, maybe I'll do wasps. Wasps are these lightly armored flame-throwing vehicles which are really fun to play with. They're very situational, but if you can pull it off they can do much more damage than their cost. But you can see I've got them totally hemmed in at this point. I have this whole chunk of the map. I have way more income, and I knew it at this point. I had to have more income than he did, despite this attack up in the corner, which reset my flags. I controlled so much more of the map that it wasn't even a question. Actually, what I wanted to do ultimately was build some howitzers and put them in this corner here, so that I could shell into his base like that. And so that was the game plan at this point in the game, because I had map control, I was feeling pretty good. You know, I had way more infantry, I had all these armored cars, I had a bunch of anti-tank guns. I didn't think there was much he could do to really put me in a dangerous position. as we'll find out, I was incorrect. But so I ordered a scout plane to try to see what he was up to. Scouted out the corner here because I was thinking about making an attack up on this flank. I checked it out and found out that, lo and behold, it was pretty much empty. However, as I was doing that, he started kind of poking out with those tanks. The first one got taken out by an anti-tank gun without any issue. But I scouted it and I discovered that, oh, he does have a tank yard and indeed several tanks. So, as a result of that, I started building my own kind of double building a construction vehicle so that I could advance the tank yard. And then later, actual tank destroyers, the Achilles. You'll notice that I am still excessing substantially. I have a lot of unspent resources right now, while Lowdive is spending every single dime. This is maybe I'm foreshadowing too much by saying this, but I think it's worth noting. So I'm advancing up the left flank here after scouting it and finding just about no resistance. I'm going to capture these flags. He's still kind of poking at my defensive line here. Somehow he managed to suppress this anti-tank gun, but that's not going to last long. However, he is kind of building up this little death ball of tanks, which is worth. I should have been scouting his base more aggressively in order to keep tabs on his forces. Instead, I was really focused on this attack up here, which turned out to be not much of an attack, but just kind of moving up. I am still excessing, but at this point at least I'm focusing on putting out tank destroyers. You can see that focusing on tank destroyers has kind of taxed my logistical capability, so I'm building up more of these supply depots. So the way logistics work in Spring 1944 is that you have this fixed supply, which you can increase by building more supply depots. Every 7.5 minutes, this amount, however much supply capacity you currently have, is refilled to the max, and that is the amount of logistics you have for the next 7.5 minutes. If you run out of logistics, you are unable to reload any units which use ammo, so tanks or vehicles or towed guns. And furthermore, any infantry you have on the map will fire 30% more slowly. They take a 30% a 30% fire rate cut if you run out of logistics. So you can see I am at 0 logistics. I don't have any supplies right now. Lowdive actually still does have a little bit, so this is most important for his infantry who are not going to be suffering from that 30% fire rate cut. I kind of overbuilt with my first of all howitzers, but also my anti-tank guns, my Achilles, and I built ahead of my ability to support them logistically. And the result of that was I was really unable to kind of defend against this attack very effectively. And that's for 2 reasons. First of all, he scouted this corridor, and he knows that I don't have much going on there. But second of all, it's because I don't have a whole lot of static defense there, and you're going to see he just drives right by my anti-tank gun because I couldn't see it. There's no support there, it got easily suppressed, and his tanks are just flying by. This is really interesting. I noticed this, and I'm like, okay, a bunch of tanks coming in, not so good. I'm going to recall my tank destroyers. I'm also, I guess I hadn't fully set in what kind of situation I was in yet. I was still just trying to build up some tank destroyers and figured that would deal with it. Sent out some scout planes and finally kind of appreciated the severity of the situation. That was a lot of tanks and infantry actually, and half-tracks to support them closing in on my base. So at this point I said, oh geez, I'm going to build some tank traps. Like if this force gets into my base, I am done. I was kind of trying to tag in with my tank destroyers here, but these are really just armored vehicles. They're not really strong enough to kind of go toe-to-toe with tanks on their own. So Lowdive pokes in here. I'm building anti-tank, tank counters as fast as I can. Unfortunately, I left my Achilles with the thin armor facing the tanks, and they were able to blow it right up. There goes my towed gun yard. Fortunately, I have these anti-tank guys, but they're not enough, and they got pinned, and now they're driving right away. So these tanks are now loose in my base. I am in serious trouble. I realized too late that I need to build anti-tank mines, but it's way too late. They're just in my base now. This was going on, so I was deciding to attack, and you can see I tried to attack and I went right into a minefield that Lowdive had cleverly prepared down that side. At this point, suddenly, I don't have any forces on the map. You can see that this kind of changed very quickly. I decided to recall some forces to deal with those tanks, but they're in my base just rampaging. At this point, they've taken out several of these supply storages, which are extremely expensive to build. You can see they cost 4,500 command. And that's intentional. The idea with Spring 1944 is that if you can get into someone's base and kill their supply storages, it's kind of the headshot mechanic in an FPS game. You know, it's the blow that's supposed to be devastating. And so you can see at this point my storage is 0. He has killed all of my supply storages. So all of my units, all of my infantry are now suffering from that 30% fire rate penalty. I bring in my anti-tank vehicles to try to deal with these tanks, but it's really too little too late. I do have some anti-tank infantry around here which are cloaked, so when Lowdive's tanks don't have infantry support, they're quite vulnerable to these infantry, as you can see. But it's really, he's already done the damage. He just gutted my base. As a result of him gutting my base, I decided to run away to secret base in the corner. And you can see, even though he has only plus 50, he controls this tiny section of the map at this point. He just had the right unit, and I was not prepared for it, and he gutted me. So at this point, my base is just totally, there's nothing left. I've got a bunch of anti-tank mines for some reason to try to protect from the next attack. I still have a vehicle yard, but it's surrounded by anti-tank mines, so I'd have to clear them before I could do anything with them. And I still have my HQ, which is nice because it gives me some basic infantry production and scout planes. But on the whole, I'm kind of in trouble. I have hardly any armed forces on the field. I've got these anti-tank units and a couple of tank destroyers, anti-tank vehicles. I did finally set up my howitzers in the corner, but because I don't have any logistics storage, they're not going to do me a whole lot of good until I'm able to get some ammo and supply them. But you can see, if everything were to go according to plan, I could attack right into his base. So that was the plan at some point, but obviously things did not go according to my plan. So I'm going to speed stuff up just a little more. Okay, so I scattered out his force in the middle. At this point, this death ball is just like totally I don't have anything that can stop that kind of selection of units. He still thinks I have important stuff back in my base, so I'm just trying to set up as much of a kind of just to slow him down as much as I can. So I'm building a bunch of anti-tank mines, building a bunch of tank traps to slow him down. The idea is that I've got to spend down this huge amount of command I have. I've totally maxed out on command because I don't have any build power right now. Meanwhile, trying to get something going in the corner here with a barracks and some storage to kind of recover a little bit, because I still have all these resources, and if I can only turn them into units, I might have a chance. Lowdive, however, is wisely investing in more tech. So he has introduced an air tower so he can get some air power going on. Obviously, this huge bundle of units coming in and attacking is just going to roll right through my base because all I have are engineers. Once again, I don't have much sight around the map. You can see that until he got to right here, I didn't know what was in this bundle. I figured it was just more vehicles, and so as a result, I had very little there that was ready to deal with infantry. So I've got tank traps, that's great. I've got anti-tank mines, that's great, but I only decided to build those anti-personnel mines when I saw he actually had a substantial infantry force heading my way as well. Really, when you're building mines at the last minute, it's never a good time. You're always, there are tons and tons of games of Spring 1944 where someone's like, oh man, there are tanks coming my way, and suddenly they're building anti-tank mines and tank traps all over the place, which is exactly what I'm doing here. And obviously, it's not helping me very much. Lowdive had a much stronger outlook in this. He was kind of more paranoid in this regard, and he tank trapped his base right off the bat to prevent those really brutal flanks, which he did to me several times. Still, I haven't given up hope. Mostly because I still have a huge pile of resources, and I'm just trying to spend it down as fast as I can. Um, and I'm really hoping that at this point that he still sees some kind of secret value over here and tries to come in with his tanks and just runs through those minefields. Unfortunately, I don't think he fell for it. He had to realize at that point that this was a heavily mined area and there wasn't a lot left after he killed my HQ. But I guess, oh, he has found me at that point. He's just kind of looking around for flags. I don't know if he's found my secret base yet. And my secret base is, you know, kind of doing all right. I've got plenty of build power, I've got some storage, you know, all kinds of things going on. Unfortunately, he found me with his air. So he spotted my base and he fighter bombed one of my storages. I'm in real trouble now. You can see I'm trying to get out an anti-air gun as fast as I can to kind of keep those airplanes off my base, but it's really kind of a lost cause. Similarly, I had a little bit of an infantry attack happening over here, but that kind of got wiped out. And at this point, my howitzers that used to be over here are also long gone. So here comes, you know, another push, which obviously I'm ill-prepared to deal with. I decided to set up a heavy machine gun on this front, as well as tank traps, so I figured that side will be mostly safe. I still have a tank destroyer, so things could be worse. Set up some mines, you know. Finally, I've got an anti-air gun up, so that's going to keep me a little bit protected. However, if you only have one anti-air gun, if the air player attacks with multiple fighter planes from multiple angles, you can actually pin and suppress the anti-air gun and kill it from the air. It takes some micro, but it's doable. You can see actually just like that. So he's got two planes here attacking. One of them is a rocket, or the two ground attack planes going after my vehicles, which is really tough because he just wiped out my tank destroyer, which is the only unit really capable of going toe-to-toe with his tanks. I'm lucky in that he ran his tanks in my anti-tank mine, so I'm not totally lost. But I decided to upgrade to tank destroyers so that I could try to have a semblance of power projection on this field. Obviously, it's not going well for me, especially because at this point my command supplies, I had a whole 10k of command, that's gone, and Lowdive is now double my resources and using every bit of it. My only advantage, my only hope really, is that he'll throw enough resources into my defensive position that it'll end up, that I'll be able to kind of reestablish myself a little bit. That's obviously not really the case because he has so many more resources than me, and because he has air power, which I can't really contest yet. He's able to do a lot right over my base, especially when I only have one anti-air gun. So I have all my engineers here repairing my anti-air, but it's no good. He's got a bunch of fighters which are able to just wipe it right out. The one kind of consolation prize for me is that this heavy machine gun is doing an amazing job of keeping these infantry from walking up the hill. It's just totally shutting it down. So Lowdive realized this, and he's having his fighters go after this machine gun. Which I realized he was attacking it, so I moved in with my engineers to repair it. At the same time, he's still marching up this hill over here, but because I still have a vehicle, it's not getting too far. The reason I have an air tower, you might be wondering, is that I was trying to go for a Hail Mary, so to speak. I was going to go for the British glider drop and put it right in his base and try to hollow out his base like that. So you'll see how that works. In the meantime, he's ordered paratroopers. He dropped them kind of right on top of my base, which is usually a really bad idea. Even though my anti-air has been killed, regular units will shoot at paratroopers while they're in the air, and they can't really do anything about it. So typically you want to drop paratroopers kind of away from enemy forces, because otherwise you lose a whole bunch of them while they're still in the air. But obviously things are dire, I would say, at this point. And we're just kind of waiting for the end. I finally have another anti-air gun, but he's being pretty good and pretty diligent about keeping those from becoming too established. If I ever got to 2 or 3 of them, his air power would probably be pretty untouchable, or pretty ineffective. And I'm just trying to crank away. Oh, no, I haven't even started building it yet. Eventually I'll have a glider, because that's what I wanted to do. That was my hope. My hope of hopes was that I'd be able to get a glider up and land it in his base and keep him from producing any more units. But even then, even in that case, if I were able to do that, he would probably still have a pile more units on the map than I do. It's interesting to note that he's basically switched all of his resources away from armor into air. So he doesn't have a huge armor force anymore, which is, I was lucky, because if he had, that probably would have ended me very quickly, especially the Sherman 105, the close support gun. And as you can see, he noted that, oh, I forgot about artillery, which definitely would have been able to clear out this hill very quickly. So he's still bringing in fighter bombers to try to clear things out, but I've got anti-air at this point, which is working pretty well for me. The way air works in Spring 1944 is that you order them from the radar, from the command tower, and then you tell them where you want them to go, and they come in, 30 to 45 seconds later. If they come under anti-aircraft fire, first of all, they take damage, but second of all, they take fear, just like infantry do. So if they come under too much anti-air fire, they actually turn around and fly back to base, and they lose fuel a little faster. So their kind of deployed time goes down substantially when they come under anti-air fire. My heavy machine gun here is still doing an incredible job. Really, Lowdive should have been spreading out his units, and probably using mortars or maybe snipers to try to deal with this guy. My disappointment just a second ago is probably palpable when he dropped a fighter bomb right on top of my tank destroyer yard. So he's got tons of fighters. My anti-air is doing okay, but he's, if you have a whole sortie of fighters just dedicated to taking out the anti-air, eventually you're going to take it out. It's not very cost effective, but really Lowdive has money to spare to spend on taking out my anti-air guns. So even though he lost a bunch of planes in the process, he did it, and that's what matters. Now I don't have any way to build anti-air guns, and he can just roam with his planes all over my base. He used a ground attack plane with rockets to take out that heavy machine gun, and so even though I finally cleared out this section of infantry, and I'm like, oh yeah, maybe I'll be able to advance and take some of the map back, there's really basically no chance. From this point onwards, I was essentially playing just to kind of see how far I would get. I really wanted to get to the point where I could send my glider in and see if I could do any kind of damage. But Lowdive's switching back to tanks. He's got the whole map under control. He's got way more resources than I do. I've got plus 25, and he's got plus 125. And he's got air right over my base. So all it would take from him at this point is a couple of fighter bombers targeted at my air tower or at my logistics storage to basically wipe out this little base. My little foray into the map was quickly turned around when I noticed he had a giant horde of guys coming my way. And yeah, so I started running away, and that was that. And oop, there goes my glider. So you can see my glider's coming in. That was exciting. Unfortunately, I didn't place it very well. I placed it a little too close to his base. So he actually had full line of sight on all of these units right away. And because he has tanks here, it just didn't go well. If I had placed it a little further away, maybe over here, I still might have run into these anti-personnel mines, which I didn't know about, but at least I would have been able to get some shots off into the base without being just blown away right away. I thought I'd be able to run my commando away, but then I ran him into a minefield, and that was the end of that. So, not so much for my Hail Mary plan. So I'm going to speed up the game, because at this point it's really just mop up. And things are not that interesting anymore because I don't have any forces left and he's just marching all over me. In kind of terms of takeaways from this game, I think for me the most interesting thing and the most important lesson was that even though I had basically total map control at the infantry stage of the game and vastly more resources, I didn't turn those resources into a tech advantage. Namely, I didn't spend enough money on tank counters, so Lowdive was able to build up a gang of tanks and just march right over me. You saw how he what I thought was really cool, he scouted out my defensive positions here, then he sent his tanks kind of in between them, and then right into my base. And obviously, you saw how it went. It didn't go well. So that was that game. I had a ton of fun playing it, and I hope you all enjoyed watching. If I have a chance to play some more games in the near future, maybe I'll cast those too. Thanks a lot. See ya.